I'm thrilled, I'm very excited to open up the second program. This little event, this introduction of the three studios. I'm thrilled and I'm excited since basically this is this occasion for to speak about actually to go through also changes. So but medical here in waterfall plant, we all know that. But then I have a special privilege to introduce Christina and you'll get to know them by and by. I would hope that you have all looked at their work. There's a stunning issue of FAPs from 4. Recently out, very amazing to share the journal we see with the MOS, and there's wonderful discussion documentation of the work. It's an event over here a few years ago, and the delegation are interested and and of course, this is one basically one sign of change. There's also and change is good. Change is basically what it is, or change is life. So it is at once something that is very easy to do. It's a program as small as an average class, and it's also as change. On the other hand, of course, change also feeds them dramatic. Because it happens in small places and the effects can be quite dramatic. Yet, I know I probably say this every year, but I'm also this year, I'm absolutely confident in saying that I think we're presenting the best secondary program area programs. And if change has to do also then with development and improvement, then that is it. We are doing exactly that. There's another thing that basically encapsulates change, and that is the fact that the program, the architecture class, will submit its application for the re-accreditation of this master program. That's, on one hand, nearly a formal thing. It's for the first time in 2006, and again in 2010, and 2010 was super dramatic in terms of change, because it was the moment when one secondary studio turned into 3 and by 4, so that's why those previously and not seen that effort. But it's also, of course, the occasion to really go through and think about the program and try to figure out what is it that we want, where do we want to take it, and what will be our ambitions for a period of time and define our direction for the in the next 7 years. So we'll be working intensively to formulate that, to discuss ideas, and that includes the conversation that we, the faculty, will have online. It also includes our work in the office with the school and the field. And we are going to be interested in also hearing what you think, and what you have for visions that you might contribute to our formulating that. By and by, when we get that far and the whole thing is submitted, there will be a committee coming and it will tour the school, tour the architecture. It is like last time. That committee will also meet with you to hear what you think about that program. So, then today's program is obviously, like you all know, we present now the program for the 3 studios, and then you have all the fun thinking about where to go. We ask you to basically put down your first and your second choice, third choice, fourth choice. And then we look at these bits of paper, and the only thing that you have to keep in mind, and you will have to accept, and there will be no mercy on this, is that you may not get the first choice because we will enforce an even distribution of students amongst the students. And I think that is also one thing that is one aspect of change, reducing the offer from 4 to 3 studios also means that there's no studio that will have, like last year, there's one studio with 6 units. And it's not like moving on the work produced in this group, but it's very, very clear to all of us that there's different dynamics that are working in the system. Then, after we have now presented, I think we will all go to the architecture class building. Maybe one of us will stay here and we'll take questions. So if you are curious about knowing a little bit more about what we want to program, want to know more details, then you have about an hour after the presentation so you can use it by going and see those that are speaking. I suppose you need to say very clearly around the questions, and then that will be cancelled. Regardless, at 5 o'clock, we are back here to review the master thesis projects. I think there are 6. That means that we will be here from 5 o'clock to something past 7 to review those projects. And this is the final wrap-up of last year's academic endeavors. Tomorrow, we will announce the groups in the morning. Hang out the sheets with the name of how we are distributed. And I also probably should put in that, if you were to end up having a second choice, I'd like to recall 2 things. One, there were students in the past who came and basically said, well, what I would really like to do is to take all 3 or all 4 students. And I think that also reflects on basically what I will dare to assume is the quality of the students and the quality of the work. And I think that by the time we're in the group and you engage with it, you will find that it will be perfect, it will be fun, and it will basically call on all your passion or your interest or your dedication. So you also have to remember that eventually all of them are just simply a decimal application. The main difference, I believe, between the studios of 31 very important difference is the conversation that is entertained. If we also manage to fulfill the goal that we have, we will also see to have the best possible conversation between the students. And this has been an mission of the past few years, and we've been so successful, or perhaps not so successful. It continues to be a very important and intensive mission that we have. So being in one group doesn't mean that we can exclude also from conversations and discussions that go on in the specializations. And then of course, so then of course tomorrow morning we'll do this, and then in the afternoon I think that each of the students will probably have this student. This will be announced informally, and we will find a way to break this problem. And then, of course, the happy occasion of the graduation ceremony. So that is the Museum tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And also, of course, the ones that are graduated. And Peter Schwal, the director of the museum, will hold the graduation speech. We will have the prize ceremony for the AIU Master Thesis Prize. And what else will we have? We hope that we will have a revelation to celebrate the delivery of the third issue of the journal. This is like an artist. And then the party. So I will, since I've already started, I will continue and I'm basically going to present to you, together with Damian, the program for AAP, Architecture and Aesthetic Practice. So, Damen and I have already had the privilege of meeting with the first year students in the past 3 days. That's been really great. You know, you have to remember that being a teacher, it only makes sense professionally when you are here. So when you're not here, life is a little bit easier in some ways, but it doesn't really make sense. So it's the moment when you are here and then past Monday receiving all the first year students, it's sort of like life kicks in again, like it should be. That's the perspective of a teacher, I think. And then, and Damen and I have had great fun, and also some really interesting conversation between the two of us in formulating together the program for AAP. And I look greatly forward, of course, to work with him both in first year and second year. And I will do the first part, the sort of general framework for the program of AAP, and then Damen will extend that with further details in a moment. So, Architecture and Aesthetic Practice, as you know, enjoys the wealth of an explicit and also flirtatious relationship to the arts. And in extension of the rich traditions in how architecture relates to the arts, the latter presents us with its engagement with the world related to also those that we entertain. Yet art is unencumbered by the various forms of accountability that soon weigh on architecture. Thus in AAP we use the arts to feed and stimulate our discourse and experimental practice, particularly since a number of things are shared, such as the problem of representation, the use of drawings or pictures to engender the new, the problem of the ground, and so forth. So, over the last 3 years, AAP's open and experimental exploration of architectural design in relationship to select forms of art has seen a conceptual framework emerge hand in hand with a set of continuing thematic interests in architecture. These things include the critical inquiry into the status of a given type of institution, the role and status of the drawing, and by and by also the image in architectural design at a time when certain forms of technology continue to have an enormous impact on our understanding of representation as well as our modes of production. And a third important aspect has been then questions of space, which comprise of an inquiry into temporal and what we by and by also call choreographic aspects of our engaging with architecture. Not excluding, this is important, not excluding our being always already submerged in the design space in which we operate. Not perchance this interest in space is pitted as a productive counterpoint to the explicit fascination with form and objects that has emerged with recent developments in philosophy, and obviously I'm thinking about so-called object-oriented ontology. Thus the idea of a choreography and choreographic objects, that's fine, there we go. So where was I? The idea of choreography and choreographic objects features centrally in our composite notion of space and form and stresses the idea of relational dependencies. So, to possess and maneuver through the erratic spatial fields of excessive information and matter that we are confronted with and, in fact, already inhabiting, a choreographic mind and a strategy may allow us to avoid totalizing and reductive sets of rules. The choreographic reflects a creative space insofar as reading, projecting, and assigning possible meaning to the world are part of its enactment and construction. The choreographic involves organization However, this is not an a priori organizational form, but rather action in relation to the emergence of form, and also possible construction of meaning. So, hence, choreography involves a looser, more elastic approach to space than seeing it result from making form in relation to other forms or measurable standards. Yet its precision is no less rigorous or vigilant. And based on the open experiment that AAP's program has constituted over the past 3 years, the program being presented here seeks to explicitly formalize its content, reflecting our interest just accounted for, so institutions, drawing image, space form, choreography. And this means from the very start this year, we will explicitly address architecture and select forms of architectural knowledge and epistemology. This, for instance, forms a slight difference to previous years, where certainly last year, as you probably all recall, students spent an entire semester engaging in culinary practices rather than in architectural practices. So we will use architecture infused with input and sources from the arts to explore the key questions posed by the work that we will undertake. And the work, of course, includes the institutional question. So addressing the status of an institutional form, we will specifically ask, what is school? What is a school today? What is the space of learning, of education? Who is it for? And what would be its inherent and possible infrastructure and or superstructure? We live in a time when private and public institutions define more or less the full gamut of our lives. It defines how we become assimilated in various modes of political and social constructions, and whether recognized as the power that forms socio-political life. Think of Michel Foucault, his prisons, mental institutions. Capitalist markets, of lately in architecture addressed by Benjamin Bratton. Housing the artifacts and events that we think of in terms of culture, obviously, for instance, museums. Whether understood as large political mechanisms, which the state is an example of, or in the form of a family structure, though despite being built on tiny units, is actually an enormous and ubiquitous organization, much like every institution is. And these cater to, host, take over, mold, and execute very large parts of our lives. They form spaces that we must understand at once as material and immaterial, as governed both by written and unwritten rules, and often as visible entities guaranteed by enormous invisible infrastructures and superstructures. Think of banks. The institution of schools, spaces of learning, are acute in this context, simply for the embarrassingly banal reason that there is so much to learn. In an age of rapid turnovers, technological revolutions, information overload, violent shifts in drifting populations and cultures, the question of learning, or for that sake teaching, is not to be taken for granted nor guaranteed by institutional forms or traditions. The spaces we inhabit and need to codify in order to develop architectural ideas and proposals are already fully saturated, so densely packed with information and matter that archipelagos of discrete knowledge turn into dizzying fog of noise. And one way ahead might be to embrace and construct individual narratives, forming micro-niches of expertise, expressing individual facts, skills, mastery. The art of narration in forming spaces of learning concerns how to stage and choreograph knowledge and its representation. Now, to guide us in our inquiry and to launch it, we shall initially spend some time with Cedric Price's work, and specifically his project Pottery's Think Belt. And we will do so, mind you, to paraphrase Adorno when he speaks about Mozart, we shall do so despite of his fans. That's only to say Price's work has been all over the place in recent years, and so we join a huge crowd when we go to look at it. The Pottery's Think Belt was executed between 1963 and 1966, and it implemented an infrastructure for learning in a derelict industrial area in North Staffordshire in England. And the project reused, quote, an abandoned railway line as a roving higher education facility, re-establishing the potteries as a center of science and technology. Mobile classrooms, laboratories, and residential modules could be moved, grouped, and assembled as required. And during an exhibition and event organized by Juan Herreros in 2000, were you there by then? Did you? You know of it? Well, okay. Are you doing the same? You did it with him? Wow, okay. Wow, okay. Well, you are the first ones to come in and teach us. That's great. See? That's why we need to have a conversation. So, and during that event, Price himself, because you invited him to Madrid, and he was there, and he basically saw the project as a space for thinking. And the byproduct of thinking, this is Price himself speaking, the byproduct of thinking might at one time be connected with communications, it might be connected with electronics, it might be connected with the internet or anything. The capacity for the think build to be relevant now, he said, is purely because of the mobility of people thinking has in itself increased. So our interest in Price's pottery think build is shared and in fact even suggested. It's not something that Damen and I sat down and came up with alone. By the Japanese theater director Akira Takayama. And he is currently teaching at the Tokyo University of the Arts in the program Film and New Media. And Akira is also a resident artist at the Monsunturm in Frankfurt, and we will meet with him and entertain a conversation with him about the Think Belt in conjunction with his project in Frankfurt, which is called Radio University. So, this also brings me to the end, where Damian in a moment comes up and extends this presentation. But we want to extract, of course, then the best lessons from the past 3 years and pulling various inputs of this program together. So the work in AAP in the coming year will engage with time-based cinematic techniques for the students to construct their individual thesis narratives, as already sort of half hinted at. And the film video techniques will also be used as the principal engine for the architectural design development. This is the medium engagement. Daniel Birnbaum will offer seminars. The seminars themselves are not exclusive to AAP, they're open, but he will continue then conversations with us that explore the relationship between Marcel Duchamp, Merce Cunningham, and William Forsythe. And within this context, part of our interest will lie with the augmented image and in extension a virtual and augmented reality, and not least in an immersive sense. So this interest unfolds along two axes. The first concerns the contemporary forms of representation and our engagement with the image, the construction of it, but also our ceaseless reading of it. The second concerns our always, already being in the space of the aforementioned construction, our given immersion in the design space in which we act. So AAP will stage this design space by explicitly engaging with select new forms of technology. And no one better to expand on details in all this than Damian, please.
So when you look at the Pottery Think Belt project, it's clear that the documentation of the project is actually not a non-standard architectural documentation. And if you go through it, you might come to this image, which for me at least invokes the idea of a certain thin intervention where you can read this as a thin layer of architecture which was grafted onto a landscape. So for me this is some form of a firm and at the same time gentle act of embrace between information and the underlying reality. And this is something that in many projects from that period, not only this one, can be thought of the early imagery of the digital regime, which is now pervasive. For example, the other example of that would be if we attempt a productive misreading of this Duchamp large glass. And we can read that as an instance of dissolution of the image background to accommodate weird interpolations between framed reality and a specific mode of language. So what if we attempted this productive misreading? What if this language suddenly becomes interactive to make the large glass a see-through image, not unlike one of a graphical user interface? What if Duchamp invented a graphical user interface? What would this interface do to life and to space? Who would be the user? So partially what we will deal with in terms of medium specificity in this year is this idea of the augmented image. And so we will be exploring this idea of an image of augmented space as an aesthetical problem. So we are interested in exploring this topic through time-based media and then through immersive interactive media. In the end, the aim is to situate the works within a certain moment in the history of the contemporary, which is defined by a very specific visual culture. And it is a moment that is seeing a wild proliferation of genres of both spatial and image production. And these representations they don't have a necessary political action behind them. So augmentation in this specific reading would be a layer of overlaid content. It's a thin veneer of information that comes out of productive complication of relations between an architect, users, and space. This is a form of a fictional accelerated reading of the technological possibilities of today's digital regime, social networks, ubiquitous computing, pervasive interfaces, and so forth. So specifically, we'll be looking into modes of representation of this pervasiveness and how these fictions direct and actually shape the way that we are able to imagine what is possible. Speculations on the possible interactions between analog and virtual space, and new spatial conditions that might emerge, like nested, extended, and interlocked spaces. We are also interested in pursuing a wide range of scenarios. Most of these scenarios are not exclusively utopian or dystopian, but they will always pose provocative questions such as what happens when our representations come back into the real? And questions like, what are the alternative ways of imagining educational and life scenarios in the world which is saturated by images? So the first semester will be devoted to cinematic imagery. And the videos will be developed with three audiences or characters in mind: user, space, and designer. So the subjectivity of the designer, the object of space, and and user as an audience. In the first semester, the students will work with video techniques such as storyboarding, compositing, etc. to establish cinematic narration for their projects. In the second semester, the studio is especially interested in exploring the possibilities of immersive visual fields by appropriating the AR and VR aesthetics and conceptualizing the notion of new visual field of collapsed physical and virtual reality. So we invite students to speculate on the possible tools and techniques for space inhabitation of the near future and space where the collapse of content, form, and data has overtaken, obviously, our capacity to process. So as you might imagine, we'll be working across a vast field of semi-exotic software and hardware. So we'll inviting basically students to conceptualize their own methodology of work. So I think it's safe to say that we are looking for students who are comfortable with exploring alternative ways, but also comfortable with taking technical problems and seeing them as conceptual problems. So the final project would then consist of spatial temporal design for an educational institution and a series of speculative narrative and exploratory videos. It will propose an architecture that becomes itself only through immersion of multiple factors that possess vision apparatuses, eyes, cameras, and so forth. So we're interested in developing scenarios of occupation through imagining possible alternatives for educational practice of today. Thank you.
That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
we are going to start, and hopefully you can listen to me properly. Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here and to see so many young faces. We are getting older and older.
It's part of the
And
deal.
yeah, it's part of. And it was very surprising for us how many things we share with you, and you will see how many, more than expected even, and hopefully with better. Hopefully. Well, we love frictions. Well, anyway, let's go to the explanation. We are going to talk about architecture mainly, although sometimes it's kind of be seen from outside. You will see that at the end we are going to do buildings. But having said that, well, I would say that he is Efraín García Grinda, my partner, and we are architects in Madrid. We have our office in Madrid, so we have one part of our body and our brain thinking about how to construct things. And the other part is in the university. So that's important for you to understand how we understand architecture and how we would like to teach you this year. And well, as I said, we are going to work designing a building that we normally call it like a project of public internalized medium scale building. And this year we are going to call it Interaction Center. A bit connected with Frederick Price, but not completely, you will see. And of course, we always explain that this building should situate itself within this global condition that, well, any kind of cultural data, anything, triggers multiplicity of connections with several materials, from people to machines to abstract entities. And as you can see in the picture, surprisingly, in this global condition, a total coherence is no longer relevant. Neither the origin nor the meaning are relevant anymore. And in this new, what we call new epistemological realm, what really counts is the universal and instant retrieval of an immense amount of information. And in this newfound condition, economies have unexpected ways of creating value and surplus that are not anymore based on traditional forms of production or trading. My friend is going to explain it.
Yeah, to put it clear, Uber, the most extended urban transportation company, doesn't own any coach or taxi. Alibaba, you know that, the largest retail economy in the world, doesn't have any stock and doesn't produce anything. Or Airbnb, the biggest accommodation supplier in the market nowadays, doesn't own any hotel room or even in space. As Facebook, Netflix, or other similar platforms, they are just providers of data, services, and connection between individuals based on the so-called shared economy that just connects producers, providers, and consumers. But what is more important for us is that this new epistemological scenario is supported by machinic, abstract, and automatic processes of technological nature that somehow nowadays govern our society silently. And they are not having anymore as a target the improvement of our living conditions, but the productive exploitation of any kind, any aspect of it. As you can see in the image, we are suffering from this what we call deregulation, from technology. For the first time ever, the production of immaterial commodities, maybe you know that a bit, such as subjectivity and the process of cultural valorization, are the main target of this new process of production. So instead of just producing things or commodities, what we are producing nowadays is this world of subjectivity as the most important thing. We are nowadays collectively cultivating, producing, and broadcasting the most amount of subjectivities. But then, what happens to culture in this realm? What happens when previous form of coherence succumb to a brutal, endless ocean of information with no connection between content and image? Where lies creativity, we have everything, but we have no memory of having lived anything. What is next if we all obsessively and thoroughly photograph, record, feel and spread anything rather than experience it. Where lies creativity if we have no memories at all?
So all these phenomena produce new forms of interaction amongst individuals and amongst humans and technology that adopt unknown and hybrid forms of being together, and this is quite interesting for us. And that happened halfway, this is really funny.
It's a bit of black humor, right?
Between the physical and virtual realms, such as this piece of meat, like using Tinder. But if we talk about public, the traditional ways of intervening in the public sphere are adopting less predictable and unexpected ways to define the realm of aspirations and common goals as a society.
And this is not funny at all.
This one is not. And the coming one is even less. So this is what Habermas used to call public sphere. Facing all these phenomena, our studio will be based on the redefinition of what we formerly know as public space, as I said, and we will try to reactivate the physical realm of the common, nowadays kidnapped by economic and political agents. And we have these three main words, but whenever we speak about public space, the different meanings of the concept public makes it very difficult to have a fruitful conversation. The term comprises at the same time the abstract space of exchange between individuals to a group of people physically gathered in a concrete space.
So basically we will need to acquire a better understanding of the meaning of public to be able to produce spaces in which the seed of the common and collective will appear again. The studio will work with three key concepts, as Christina was explaining. Firstly, the public sphere, the realm of common interest and goals of a specific community, defined by the participation of the individual throughout actions and discourses. Secondly, each student will define his or her own concept of publicness, based on architecture, and this is something that we'll be explaining later on. In order to define the third step, a truly physical space where a community would create its public sphere throughout physical interaction between individuals, their common goals, aspiration, and identity as a group. For this public space, for us, public space is not anymore associated, as traditionally is thought, with emptiness or with free and universal access or democratic access, if you want. But it's more the process of being together physically and sharing space, collectively building the scene throughout interaction. So we'd like to propose you to produce what we can call rare new species in architecture as incubators of alternative ways of being together, promoting difference and public dissidence as well.
So, the techno-social inquirer. So, we are here now, and this is the contemporary moment, very complex, and we are facing this technological dictatorship that trivializes everything. And we would like to work this year with you, considering technology as something subject to purposes, tools and processes with not only scientific and technological order, because for us technology is subjected to symbolic and cultural appropriation and therefore to creativity and critical appreciation. So we could speak then about the architects as techno-social inquirer, as I said, because in our discipline, someone who investigates the relations between society, technology and nature is an architect. Someone that selects, assembles and critically develop techniques with an inquisitive attitude into an ad hoc set of instruments and tools adapted to a specific context that cultivates a sort of ad hoc awareness, combining a conscious celebration of what is within reach while creatively using the most advanced processes of definition, control and simulation. And you can see that I'm using creativity all the time because we do think that is the basis of this work.
And we'll be using a very old-fashioned word as well, but trying to give it a new scope. Obviously, we are not interested in the question of how much data can we collect or how quickly can we process it. The studio will not be only about technology. It's not just about technology, But we are interested critically and positively in the strange and unexpected qualities that arise in architecture from such new states. The goal of this year is to explore radically new, unexpected and emergent forms of interacting and being together, and investigate the active role that architecture can play on all this. Quoting Thierry Price, we'd like to make architecture a better performer, to something that enriches or enlives people's lives as much as other things do, and to make architectural decisions still relevant for this construction of the public. This renewed performative condition of architecture can happen at two main levels, and that's pretty important for us, and will be very important for us this year especially. Firstly, at the level of physical interaction, it means enabling and fostering new forms of togetherness. And secondly, and that's a pretty interesting thing for us, and we're more and more engaged with this, at the connotative level, redefining the world of symbolic associations among the collective identity and architectural qualities. So somehow bringing a new meaning to the word monument.
There is also no fashion word, but we want to release this word from any bad connotation. And this word, monument, comes from the Latin term monere, literally the act of remembering or bringing something from memory to our present thoughts. And we are interested in evolving this notion into a progressive, non-nostalgic and radical notion of the act of remembering and reconnecting, in this case related with the collective body of a community, as a response to the collective amnesia produced by these technologies, or this overwhelming world where anything goes because nobody remembers anything and anybody cares. And also, as an alternative to the classical notion of monument, of course, we will construct meaningful links between architectural expressions and the world of contemporary collective identity, connecting every architectural decision with the creative use of scientific knowledge and technologies, contemporary ideas about nature, the power of media, political participation, dissidence, transgender and collective identities. But our studio is about not only about technology per se, as I can explain, it's about contemporary collective cultures, technologies and natures. And this picture is very interesting from these many points of view that emerge from the particular means by which we produce and socialize today.
Nowadays, and this is something that we are maybe by recalling this old-fashioned word monument, is very much connected with the uncritical overuse of any kind of language for any purpose present in all kind of media. That has led, in our opinion, to the loss of connection between sign and meaning, between image and content. At the same time, known languages are no longer a critical tool for cultural agents. We were having a very interesting conversation with someone which is very kind of relevant in the architectural scene, telling us basically that you can use any language, any image for anything. And that for us is a tragedy, right? So relinking content with image or with imaginary is one of the main kind of targets for the studio. It's just in opposition to this anything goes that seems to dominate the discipline. The studio will develop proposals that recover the connotative power of forms, spatial organizations, shapes, geometries, and tectonics, creatively dive into the value of abstraction and the construction of new grammars. It's not only about, assembling new languages, but it's about abstraction and also reconstruction of the links between different kind of sources. We call this macaronic adherence, rather than the pejorative meaning of macaronic, that in English means affected or dandy, or in Spanish macarra. that means violent, vulgar, or cocky, will use it in its original sense. And the word macaronic was coined in the 15th century in Venice. In that moment, words and popular expression from dialects were introduced into the Latin, the language, the cult Latin, into a creative and playful way to construct poetry dealing with philosophical issues through everyday aspects. It was used mainly as a creative distortion of pre-established languages that critically and sharply mixed terms and syntactic structures, using them within the framework of the main language of Latin.
So now, having depicted the complexity of the world that we are living in now, I'm going to explain more practical things like what shall we do. First of all, we will investigate this weird world around. This is the first step, of course. And the students will project and develop a medium-scale interiorized public building, as I said when I started, testing the spatial organizations, programs, typologies, and these macaronic languages to create public artifacts that challenge the idea of the spectacular urbana that has dominated most of the recent examples of public space, and understanding and exploring its cultural and political nature. How shall we work? Through readings, writings, and a constitution. This is the first part of the semester. We normally start constructing a constitution, that is a set of rules that will define the projects, the buildings, and helping through this cultural background that we will have through these readings and writings. The Constitution must define the spatial conditions, the location, and the context, the expanded notion of the context to which the project will refer, and try to establish, as I said, every single condition of the project. And we'll also construct a living archive of, we will construct a living archive of visual and textual references, drawings. Our work normally is based on drawings, books, essays, art, moving images, so many tools in order to materialize newfound links between readings and documenting as a process to form a critical position, to stand a critical position and questioning contemporary notions of beauty. The second part of the semester will be dedicated to adjust and develop every single detail of the project, because for us it's very important to try to be real and to address the reality of a project, understanding the techniques associated as a set of culturally based practical piece of knowledge. We call it deep resolution, and it's meant threefold. Resolution as a methodology to inquire with more rigor. Second, to adopt contemporary techniques of complex creation. And third, to acquire resolution in the technical descriptions of the project. Don't forget that our background is purely technical. During the second part of the year, second semester, we will pay attention to the way the project is represented also. As a radical media, we call it radical media, every single student has to adjust content and representation to convert it into a form of inquiry. At the end of this presentation, you will see examples of this radical media. These modes of visualization are therefore linked to the same nature of the project on the one hand, and must contain a critical spirit and a radical message, and also add layers of knowledge and reading to the proposal in a way that everything is linked and coherent.
For the field trip, we'll travel to London, and our visit will have the opportunity of understanding architecture as a useful means for creating or inducing interaction with other individuals or even agents, different kind of agents, not only individuals. And we'll look into London historical typologies that proposed radical forms of interacting with different kind of subjects and actors, such as other species and ecosystems, like in Kew Gardens Palm House, history and past recreated by the institution of the museum, and objects, in Sound House, understanding the history and future of the relations with technology and interaction. Studying some classical and historical examples that for us are still relevant to understand what a space for interaction, physical space for interaction could be nowadays, such as Crystal Palace and Fun Palace and the Interaction Center, which is the image that we're seeing on the screen, and visiting and studying take price seminar work as well.
So, for you to see examples of previous years, but I have to say, we always say that we hope to see your personal approach, so those are not examples of what you have to do, but something to understand that you can work freely in architecture. So you will notice that in these following examples, the techniques and the ways of documenting and the drawings are linked to the concepts that each student was exploring or the position that the students defended. So by nature, never two students are doing the same thing or materializing their work in the same way. For us, a project, we understand the project as a prospective and inquisitive attitude, so as an attitude more than as a way of working. So that allows us to discuss broader and relevant questions. And we do believe that the project has the potentiality of incorporating theories, ideologies, political positions also, and subjective stances, personal. And it can be done through purely architectural, and this is important, through purely architectural decisions. And the coming projects have been done by our students following this understanding, like this one that is the Cumulus by Carly Gerler, where the nostalgia of the physical labor and the contact with rough and crude nature is played as a mundane pleasure. Or this Cloud Hotel by Giri Escola is an ensemble of maze-like horizontal circle. It's not here in the picture, it's only the floating room over Battersea Power Station. Or this one by Erin Cuevas that proposed an interiorized public space based on PC music label, playing with an hyperpop iconography and language based on contemporary popular phenomena and media. This is the case of Frederick Helber. He created the second community in the artificial desert town of California, Titi, as an avatar of a mountain, to be perceived as a mirage floating above the desert, and hiding this immense space, working simultaneously with high luminosity levels and energy production.
Or these territorial games orchestrated by women by Jack Young Kim as a parody of a military game that redefine boundaries and create conflicts in the Korean DM set. And throughout these territorial games, women redefined boundaries and deliberately created conflicts at a geopolitical level between North and South Korea. And Rob's Taylor Golden Temple of Garbage, an alchemical playground that converts an accumulation of electronic commodities into nuggets of precious materials. In the case of Rob's work, is a perfect example of the way documentation reinforces the definition of a project. And using augmented reality on top of his drawings, is a pity that we are not having the filming here. Krija created a video game arena where any environment can be created through a network of projectors, screens, and virtual reality that were once massively role-playing games based online are now played out in trillions of pixels in which new forms of congregation and interaction emerge. Last year, Lorenzo Perry created a space of accumulation growing from a marketplace in Burkina Faso in Africa. This assembly is a different kind of bank where grain, beer, and political utopias are stored and exchanged. The project initiates a democratic process for activists of Burkina Faso and ends in a communal arena where the production and consumption of beer supports political emancipation. So, we are proposing you a big challenge, we know, but we hope that it's a very exciting one for you. How architecture nowadays can still reflect the world around and propose effective and plausible transformation of our environment while being extremely connected and critical, that's an important word for us, with our own societies.
Then just a few notes about our own work. So following our students, we will show some images of our own work in the office to explain the target of the studio together with you. That basically will be to generate a space of the common, reinventing publicness and rethinking what the notion of a building would mean today as a recipient of meaning associated with a collectivity, as a spaces of interaction, as constructs that reflect a particular state of the technology, but also as receivers and emitters of critical content.
So basically, in conclusion, we would like to propose you to explore the contemporary nature of public space through this interaction center, experimenting with monumentality and new forms of publicness that with these macaronic and excessive languages and ad hoc technologies will compound dirty and alive places, proposing a new and unexpected forms of beauty and pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to see some of my friends here. You know, every time I come into this school, you know, and we haven't met us for 4 months, you know, I always wonder, what am I going to teach? You know, what is it really? What is it really that I can tell these people? And I tell you why I say this, because I just recently was in a country that I've never been. I met people that I guess I would never meet anywhere else. But I realized, even when we never met, we never saw each other, there was an idea that they want to learn something, you know, or they want to discuss something. And I didn't know what it is, you know, and I thought, I show you the newest technique, you know, some really crazy, you know, computer stuff, you know, and something. And until I realized, as long as we talk, I realized in my head, I cannot learn you anything. The only thing that I hope I can show you is you can love architecture. And the only means that I want to present with you in a studio is, what could you really do with architecture? Is there something that you can do with it and perhaps you still like it? And it was a really crazy experience to me, not only seeing your presentations, but also because there was a young Iranian I met now in Tehran, and after I told him, look, you can do something with architecture. He said, Peter, don't you think that you are such one of these old-fashioned guys, you know, who basically have a wrong description of architecture? And then I realized probably I'm absolutely old-fashioned. But I can tell you, I didn't know it by myself. I think there is something in architecture that you can really like. So what I'm proposing to you this year, and as you know, I'm a total dictator. You're not allowed to do anything. I enforce my own methodology on you. Yeah, you are slavery of my own thoughts. This year, I don't teach you anything, but I give you one question, and I help you to answer that question, okay? And I help you this in many ways. I think like many of my colleagues, I help them with writing. No writing. Writing, architects cannot write, including me. Yeah? So just I told Johan, forget the thesis, yeah? Because these people are just so good in faking theses, yeah? Because what they really show us, what they can do, is how to copy well, yeah? So copying will be our primarily methodology, yeah? So the question we are going to raise is very simple, and that is, how does the city want to look like? Now, what it means is, and as you can see, I try to hope that I can explain it. What it really means is very simple. Imagine you don't know what a city looks like. Imagine others don't know what a city looks like. Imagine everyone who thought knows what a city should look like doesn't know it, yeah? But imagine only the city knows how it wants to look like. So the idea, what I wanted to present to you is that I think the 20th century has been a century where we humans thought we know how the world should look like. And I would say postmodernism to me was, if I look back to postmodernism, was where we question if we really know what the world should look like, yeah? And so you have people who says, oh, don't draw with the right hand, draw with the left hand, yeah? Or don't have an idea, have a process, yeah? Don't think that you can have a sketch. I always think about Ben van, I don't know if you know, but there was always this guy, how is he called, Aaron Batsky, who said to Ben van Berkel, can you make a book, yeah? And then he said to him, but you have to also make some hand sketches, because then they think you have an idea. Yeah? So then the architect was forced to make an after theory, yeah, in order to suggest the theory. So just to know, we know how to fake, yeah? And so then I realized probably that when postmodernism didn't know anymore if we are sure, then I think what currently is happening, that we definitely know that we don't know anymore how the world should look like. So in that contemporary idea, I think there is a thesis here that is called accelerism. And accelerism is something I just learned recently, and what was very hilarious is it's an idea of philosophy where someone says the left is wrong, the right is wrong, yeah? The only thing what we have to do to go through both of them, yeah? And so what I want to propose to you is, we're going to look in a city, you tell us how the city looks like, and the only thing you do is you just accelerate it, okay? And hopefully we have a debate in which you show that how the city, or basically how that can look like. Now, everything else what I'm saying now is basically just some images. And so in order to also get some students in my group, we are not going to London. If you want, you can come even to New York, there's also a choice. And from New York, because we are bored, we then go to LA, yeah? And then we make holidays in the Caribbean, eh? No, sorry. So as you know, all my fascination so far was always on a very simple thing, and that is the city is a production of architecture, and architecture is a production of the city. I'm not changing that. This is my life. I cannot change it. This is the only thing I'm doing. This is what I know. But what is different to something what I did last year is that since I do a little lecture series also for the first year, what I want to build with you in the first half of the semester is also to give a thesis of postmodernism, how we thought the real should look like. Now, as you know, it's very easy to be sexy these days, and I've done it by myself. You just make crazy stuff, okay? So if you want to be radical, you do call Dr. Strange, Yeah, just to know, I show you that because colleagues of mine thought that this is inspiring for me, yeah, because they seem to be that I'm working in this direction, but the work is too boring, yeah. So they said, look, this is the way how you really have to make an animation, and I don't know if you know the trailer, the ground folds into itself, you know, suddenly the section goes off, you know, yeah. Just to know, don't worry, if you want to be like that, you know, you're welcome. But what I wanted to say is, probably it's easy to just be fictional, yeah? It's easy to be radical. But in this idea of acceleratism, there's something very funny. Because neoliberalism doesn't have a problem with excess. Far from being subversive, transgression today is completely normal. So what it means is, to be radical is just normal. To be crazy is normal because, you know, Marilyn Manson and Dandino doesn't shock you at all. It becomes the common. So basically, the monster is not a radical thing. The weirdo is not radical. It's just part of us. It's just, you know, in the Middle Ages, yeah, the crazy guys, you know, were with us. Yeah? They were just common. So the idea I'm asking is, what if the real is much more crazier as that what we can imagine the real to look like? Yeah? And so the book I want to discuss with you is a book that I think many might know came out of the idea of the hyper-objects, where a person like Timothy Morton argued that what we really know about the world is probably this little iceberg, but what we don't know about is this upper thing. Yeah? And so in that idea that as more as we try to study, as more as we want to know how things are, as less probably we really understand them. And so this is a little bit the hypothesis what I propose. Huh? So what we learn from is not what we know about it, what we learn from is what the thing is in itself. So to be clear, and this is a kind of little summary. Now, to give you now, of course, some little images, I give you now two ideas how we have done it in the 20th century. So one thing was, for example, one part is we thought we can be rational about the cities. Yeah? So just to know how it looked like, this was the idea that within the real world, yeah, if we rationally understand it, yeah, we can see a certain truth. Yeah? And so people, for example, like, if you look now back, work like Ungers, work like Rossi, even things like Kohlhaas, there was the idea that in the reality there is a truth and we rationalize this and we can construct it. Now, so what we have done is we looked into populations, found their morphologies, abstracted them into models, you know, and then started to suddenly have a kind of abstract vocabulary which produces. Or we said, no, we don't really rationalize this, can see, we all have to be an empirical person. We have to go in and zoom out and try to understand how things work, and then we can learn, yeah? And so everyone went to Hong Kong, you know, and then we mapped this thing, you know. I didn't know it, there's a drawing, look at this, yeah? From Kowloon City, yeah, look at this. So we thought even when we redraw it, you know, every little piece, we might understand, and then we get a 3D map, you know, look at this, and then we say, this is Anarchy. But I would propose the third version, and that is, what if we just accelerate the real, and what we use it as an aesthetic strategy on our city? So what we are going to look at, and this is what I might want to ask you, is that the first half of the year, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter where you see, you collect real things. You collect them how they're built, you collect them, you try to understand them, you tell us. And I thought what we could do is, everyone chooses all the elements a city have, how we live, how we work, how we need electricity. I don't know if you know, there was a guy called, a French guy, how is it called, who did the linear city, the industrial city, Charles Garnier, yeah? And I don't know if you have seen that, you know? He said, this is what I think the city should look like, yeah? We need a street, Here we need some houses. There's a hotel. Oh, we need electricity. Oh, then he carved in a kind of little nuclear power station in the mountain. Then we have a factory. Then made an image. That's it. I thought we'd do something similar. Yeah? But the only thing is we don't imagine them. You just collect them. And what we do is you collect everything. You collect stuff like this, rubbish bins in the oceans. I don't know if you know this. This is the GRU, yeah? This is this gigantic rubbish thing, in the ocean. Then we need some electricity stuff, this is how we do. Then we might find images like this, because it's for housing. And then we need probably something like this. And then what we do is, we just reassemble them to make something real, okay? And so the idea is in the end that I hope that instead of we make a kind of a new generic city, out of this. So instead of having a plan with grids and then building them houses, we make this kind of generic city. Now, the rest what I have now is boring as usual. As you know, I turn into a weird historian. I don't know why, but anyhow. What I have now is just showing you that what we do, I would say, has a history of assemblage or a history of copy, and I want to introduce to that, and so that you see that the thing what the city really did, his whole history long, was nothing else as trying to put things together in close proximity. And that's what we're going to discuss, and I hope in the end, the question that I'm raising to you, how does the city look like, is so broad that you can come with your thesis and try to develop them. So just know, the Greeks just have put some little functions, of different things floating on a square. The Romans glued them together. The Middle Ages stuck them. Or put the one into the other. This is the nice one. It was first this, and then you just put the house into it. Don't worry, they have done this with palaces as well. This was the Diocletian Palace, and then you just make a middle-aged city. And then I have a nice reference that you showed. When the Muslims came, and the Roman and the Christian took over, just put the church into the moschee. And then when we thought we got bored and need some high-rises, we just took a column, and scaled it up. Or we took a church, and chopped off, some of the... Or here we just stuck a campanile into a high-rise because we didn't know how a high-rise looks like. Or we just stacked land above each other. Or we just extruded it. Or made a crazy sphere. Or stuck, everything, collage thesis, stuck anything. Or this is also a nice one, we just took an Italian piazza and put it into a high-rise building. And then hopefully something like this comes out. So what I'm hoping is that someone does a city like this, which is basically the assembly of your parts. So just as a summary to this, what we are dealing with is, on the one hand side, not only how to assemble, and so theoretically you would say not only how to make a mass or how to produce density. Here's some nice images. But the question will also be, how do you produce something that is intensive? Meaning something that accumulates money. And hopefully in the end, we are doing a post-Anthropocene, post-human urban project. As you know, I like big things. We have to compete all the other years, and we're going to make a model that is gigantically big. Thank you very much, guys. Oh, just one thing. If someone has a question or want to meet, I have to meet you tomorrow morning between 9 and 10:30.
Is it run now?
No, I'm here the whole day, but just tomorrow we not meet in the afternoon from 9 to 10:30.
So